Hi, everyone. I'm Michael Lee, the founder of the Data Incubator. Really excited to have you at our latest episode of Data Science in 30 Minutes. For those of you who don't know, we run a fellowship for PhDs and master's students who are looking to enter industry as data scientists. And the program is completely free for fellows who get in. And if you're interested, you should apply at thedataincubtor.com. We also have a series of online courses for people who are working professionals or full-time students. And if you're interested in those, you should also go visit our website at www.thedataincubtor.com. So today we're here to talk about data science and do so in 30 minutes. And this is part of our regular monthly series about data and its role in the world. Past speakers have included Kirk Bourne, who's the Director of Data Science for Booz Allen Hamilton, Becky Tucker, the data scientist at Netflix, Jess Strofe, the VP of Data at Quantopian, Andreas Muller, who's one of the creators of Scikit-learn, and Sam Swift, who is a data scientist at Betterment and also a former fellow at the Data Incubator. And now, before I introduce today's speaker, I want to remind everyone that you can pose questions in the YouTube chat area. We'll monitor them and we'll pose them to the speaker towards the end of this segment. And of course, in order to pose those questions, Google will make you log in. So please do log into Google. Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce today's speaker. So I think if you're a member of the data science community, you will, of course, have heard of Jake Porway. Jake uses the big data to tackle big social problems. He's the founder of DataKind, where he connects data scientists with not-for-profit companies, which often don't have the know-how or resources to benefit from data analysis. And he's a former New York Times data scientist and is very passionate about bringing humanity all the benefits of big data and AI. So without further ado, Jake, you want to take it from here?
Excellent, Michael. Thank you so much for having me. And hey, everyone, it's a total pleasure to be here. I'm very excited because, of course, I get very passionate about communities of data scientists using their skills for good. So I'm very excited that many people on this call are learning to become data scientists. So I want to give you just a quick overview of what DataKind does, show you some of our projects if you're not familiar with us, and then open it to questions. So I'll give you kind of a brief overview here, and I'm just going to ask Michael for a little audio confirmation when you can see this thing full screen, because it will take you away from me and I can just see my slides.
Yep, it's full screen.
Hey, fantastic. All right, gang. So, I think the thing that's worth reflecting on is, of course, what's crazy is how quickly the terms big data have blown through the world. 10 years ago, we started talking about this big data revolution because there were suddenly more cell phones on the planet than people, capturing all this data about where we go and what we do. We're instrumenting ourselves with sensors across our bodies to read everything that we're feeling and thinking. And of course, all of this, digital groundwork laid the way for even better, algorithms to come out, so that now machine learning and AI are beating us at our own games like Go, and we're creating a whole tribe of incredibly polite but creepy robots. And, this is all because we're entering this phase where we're kind of digitizing the species. Yeah, we're digitizing the world. And that, I think, is what's so exciting and can sometimes get lost in all the buzz around AI or big data, is that we're looking at something that's not just a business trend. It's not just cool sci-fi tech. It's nothing less than a nervous system of our planet. And when you think about it that way, I think the really exciting part is that means there's just unending things we could learn about our world, things that we could optimize, think about our communities and what kind of planet we want to live on in ways we never could before. And so that's incredibly exciting. In my own journey into this I remember feeling this excitement coming, as Michael said, into the New York Times R&D lab as a data scientist, but then being so disheartened that this wonderful technology was mostly being used to sell people stuff. Amazon had great prediction algorithms for what you want to buy, great recommendation algorithms, or, of course, now you can talk to some kind of home assistant to watch a movie, which is using the most advanced natural language processing and audio processing just to make sure you don't have to click a button on your remote control. And don't get me wrong, this stuff's great. I use all of this stuff. It just felt like if we really were in this moment of evolution, that there was so much more we could do. And so in looking for how we could apply data science and machine learning to social good, I started with the people I knew best, data scientists. And so I started going to hackathons and really felt like this might be where we could make our change, is where there were excellent data scientists sitting alongside government officials, alongside experts from NASA and Google. And I said, man, whatever we can build in the next 24 hours is ours. We don't need our jobs. We don't need governments to decide this. We can build the things we want for the world we want to see. And after just 48 hours, people built things that were so disappointing. I mean, they're technically interesting, but this person built this is a winner of a hackathon that used some AI algorithm to optimize your playlist. I can't even remember what it's based on, your TV watching or something like that. Some other folks built a tool at the latest TechCrunch hackathon to make sure that you can find the item on the shelf you're trying to buy in store. And it's fine, but this stuff's like more of the same. And it just feels like if we have this great opportunity to solve big problems, maybe we need to look beyond the problems of us as technologists ourselves. But of course, like the really cool thing about this digital democratization is all these organizations you don't think of as data science or AI companies are becoming that way, including small nonprofits like this group, Medic Mobile. And they have a great program where they go and do community health work, which means volunteers in the community go and provide maternal health services to folks in their community. And they do this all via cell phone. So huge amounts of data is pouring back in about every person they've seen, what their symptoms are, how they treated them. And with that data, you could imagine combining that, or even just using that data alone to build early warning systems about outbreaks, or combining it with weather data to optimize how the community health workers travel so they can treat more people. And so you go, this is great. If we could just get data science and machine learning in the hands of nonprofits and charities and international governmental organizations, they could make the change. They could build the same things that we're building in industry, but of course they have no one to help them do that. I mean, it's not helped by the fact that data scientists are incredibly expensive. It's hard for folks to know how to work with them. And you've got unhelpful headlines like AI researchers are making more than $1 million, even at a nonprofit, which is just going to scare everyone away at a minimum. So at DataKind, we just thought, well, what the heck? Why can't we just get these people together? Got data scientists giving their time back, building incredibly sophisticated things, but without social focus, and social organizations awash in data who could use this. And so that's how we started DataKind. It started as kind of an accident. I just asked if anyone in New York wanted to do a social good hackathon. Before we knew it, that request had gone viral. Thousands of data scientists and governments and NGOs around the world had written back and said, we want to partner up. And we spent the rest of our time ever since helping support people who want to work together so that we can do more good social impact with data science. Let me show you just a few quick examples, and then we will roll into questions. One disclaimer I have to make is that I've already been sloppy with terms. Data science is not machine learning, is not AI exactly. I use them all to try to capture the broad net of what people are thinking about. And so to me, for the rest of this talk, I will probably use them fairly interchangeably, simply to mean the use of data and computers for improved decision-making. That is, if you can hang with me on that, then we can debate the nuance of the terms later. So really quickly, speaking of that application, a group called Conservation International came to us and they said, hey, we've got this big problem. We have years worth of data and information, papers about all of the interesting new ways people are doing conservation. And it takes us about a year to read all of the academic papers and synthesize what it is we're supposed to do or what things we could do to make more progress in conservation. And the amount of papers we have to read every year just keeps growing and growing. And so it's untenable for us to do this. And so is there any way that we could actually absorb this information faster? So we built them a team of volunteers ranging from chart-beat data scientists to environmental conservation biologists. And together, they built an algorithm, basically a tool called Colander, which sucks in all these academic papers, parses them, understands, does some semantic labeling, and then helps the reader actually kind of automatically tag and organize this stuff. And now Conservation International can summarize a year's worth of data, it used to take them a year to do it, into just a 1-month process. And on top of this, because it's an open source tool, over 200 other organizations are using this now. And so in a way, you're seeing a whole swath of social organizations do their work better, faster, stronger, thanks to the work of these volunteers. So great example of a tool that would be kind of sci-fi for, I think, a lot of nonprofits, but here's being used to really help them and their day-to-day operations. Another project that we just finished up was with a group called Global Witness. And Global Witness basically helps communities that are nearby international development projects. So what you're looking at in this image, you can see a giant pit mine. It's like a big open mine. And of course, all around that mine, there are houses and buildings. So if this starts to leak into the water supply or any unethical practices happen, these folks would be affected. And that's when they'd go to Global Witness and say, hey, we need you to help advocate on our behalf. Global Witness has a great process for advocating for people. They're very successful, but what they don't know is where the mines are. So unless someone tells them a mine is going into place, they don't know. And most mines are not as obvious as this. They look a lot more like this on Google Maps, these kind of flashing red dots here. And so Global Witness said, if we could get a map of all these mines, we could be more proactive. But how are we going to do that? Have someone just look at Google Maps all day? No. So we got a team of folks from Google Brain and Sidewalk Labs basically got together and said, hey, I think we could just use satellite imagery to track down where those mines are. So what you're looking at here is a image of a real mine. That little Google map pin is where the real location is. In the middle pane, those two red dots in the center are the true mine extent. And on the far right is where the computer thinks the mine extent is. And visually, you can see they match pretty well. But if that's not apparent, you can also see this tool that they built for Global Witness, which basically, I'm just seeing it in a Jupyter notebook here, shows where there was high confidence of a mine boundary. And now someone from Global Witness can go zoom in, look at these things, actually see if there's a mine there. It's not meant to automate the process fully. That someone still needs to kind of sign off on what they're seeing. However, this is massive improvement to time that they would have never been able to do before. And if you Google Global Witness and DataKind, they just put up a post about this, about how they're thinking about using AI moving forward. Again, another case where they just kind of got superpowers because they couldn't do this before. And lastly, I want to talk about one that's not a DataKind project, but to me is one of the more interesting ways that I see people using machine learning and AI in social good. So obviously, one of the big breakthroughs in the past couple of years is that computers can recognize objects in video a lot better than they could before. So here you see a scene where cars and people are being identified. That always creeps people out a little bit, but it's just doing objects right now. But the great thing is that's a very accessible code. It's more easy to do this these days. And there was a social organization that said, we can do something good for the world with this. And they actually built out a tool for conservation. So on the left, you can see they've unleashed this to actually recognizing types of animals like giraffes and trees. But even more than that, the algorithm's gotten so good that they can find markers of individual animals, so a specific shark or a specific giraffe that they care about. And what they're doing now is they're sucking in tons of YouTube videos and mining them for these locations of animals so they can track animals in the wild, understand migratory patterns of where they are. So when your grandma goes out on a whale watch and takes a video, it goes up, it gets sucked in by this group called WildMe, and then they'll actually recognize it and even leave a little comment like this one says, we found whale shark P323 in your video. Here's everything we know about this shark from our research. And I love the response. Wow, and you're in AI. From all of humanity, please don't conquer us. Which I always find funny because like of all the AI that I would like us to be conquered by, like conservation bot AI is pretty high on the list. It's pretty nice AI to be conquered by. So these are just a few examples of the ways we're seeing people apply this advanced technology to pretty important social problems. And so at DataKind, we are a global community of over 18,000 community members. We work all over the globe, but we do have 5 community hubs, I would say. So in London, Singapore, Bangalore, DC, San Francisco, and New York, we have regional communities. We've done over 250 projects, and we're continuing to grow that out. So that is kind of the high level on DataKind. I think for the sake of time, we'll just touch on one last point before we go to questions, because at this point, hopefully you're watching this going, cool, I'd like to volunteer. I'd like to get involved in using data for social good. And there are actually many ways to do that, not just with DataKind, but many more places like Kaggle, Data for Democracy, or the great Data Science for Social Good programs are places where you can volunteer your time and do some social good. But the one thing I'll just really touch on, if you do want to go into this, is that a lot of folks will think, hey, we're just add a data scientist or throw some AI at a problem in social good and it'll be great. What social problem do I want to hack? How can I hack homelessness? But it never works that way. In fact, these are really tricky problems to solve. There's even a type of problem called a wicked problem. That's a problem that's difficult or impossible to solve because of incomplete, contradictory, and changing requirements that are often difficult to recognize. And almost any social problem fits into this bucket. You really can't get your hands around it because it touches so many things. And I think this is different than the data problems that we encounter in business, because often things are very constrained. We were working within our customer base or within our departments, so we have a lot of control over things. When you start to go try to solve problems in the wild, it gets really messy. So we've noticed just a few things to think about that really help us do that well. How do you get around a wicked problem? The first is that we realize there's about 6 different components we need to do a great data science for social good problem. Forgive me that for the sake of time, I won't go through them all, but just like very briefly, working from the problem statement on the top left and going counterclockwise, you need a very clear problem to solve. Technologists usually can't solve it. You need a social organization to define it. You need to have a social actor. So that means someone on the ground is going to use this. Subject matter experts will help you figure out where in the landscape the thing to build is. You need funders to fund this. Data scientists, of course, to actually know how to build it. And then the data sets that'll be the raw materials. And the thing that's really interesting is in the social sector, at least, almost none of these live in the same place. So you have to spend a lot of time hunting. And so that's one thing that we find really helpful to get inside folks' head is as you go off to do this work, it may be a little bit of a scavenger hunt. And we at DataKind, of course, we do that scavenging. So if you want to come work on our projects, we try to do this work up front so that folks don't have to kind of, track it all down around the world. And then we also have these principles for, design principles going into this that I think people should be aware of. I'll just mention this top one, just being conscious of time, because it's the most important one, which is that finding problems is absolutely harder than finding solutions. What I mean by this is most organizations can't articulate a data science or machine learning problem. And so a lot of groups that we talk to, like one time we talk to the Red Cross, they'll come and say, hey, I've got a data problem. And we're like, oh, great, we'd love to hear it. And they're like, our Microsoft Access database is, version, is from 2001. We want to upgrade it to 2005. Like, you ready for that data science? And, it's, of course, like that's something we could do, but working people back to asking, well, what are the problems you really encounter in your business? Really gets people to kind of think differently. That when we talked to the Red Cross, they started to think, well, what we actually care about is stopping fires. There's all these preventable fires that happen because people, don't have smoke alarms and fires go off and they get killed. And we want to stop that. And, some data scientists, then we walk backwards and say, okay, well, how do you know where those happen? I said, well, we've got historical data about fires, but that's about it. So, well, how do you stop them? So, well, we're going out to put smoke alarms in places. Well, how do you know where to put them? And it, kept working through that kind of business process to finally get the Red Cross to a place where they said, oh, if with data science we could predict where these fires are most likely to happen, we might be able to prevent them in advance. And that's really great because that was, that's where the data scientists, in collaboration with the partner, figured out the right problem, found the data that could support it, and actually did end up building that project, which has been saving hundreds of lives a month. So be prepared for that. In business, often we know the business objectives or our department leads come and bring us the problems. In the social sector, it is a total art to get people to think that way. So there's a lot more we could talk about. There are other principles I'm flashing through that we could work through. There's, of course, the ethics question, because especially today with all the news about Facebook and the New York Times, there's a lot of questions about how this stuff goes right or wrong. We'd be happy to talk about. But I will simply say, for all of those challenges, the thing we have seen work time and time again is great people getting in the room, working across the aisle with great people on the NGO side, and building things together. So I would say that whether with DataKind or anyone else, I would encourage you to, if not get involved, maintain a part of the conversation, because as data scientists, we have incredible opportunity to play a role in this and to define how this technology is used. So you can keep the conversation going with us at DataKind on Twitter or on our Facebook page. You can also come and get involved at datakind.org/get involved. And even if you don't want to be on a project, we talk all the time about the state of the space, how to use data science ethically and capably, and how we might actually go from just using data and machine learning to make better decisions about the kind of movies we want to see, and how we can all get together to a place where we can use data and machine learning to make better decisions about the kind of world we want to see. Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate you all listening and learning a little bit about DataKind. And now I'll turn it back to Michael.
Yeah, no, that was a great presentation. As I was mentioning earlier, I think I heard Jake's presentation a few years ago and thought this was one of the best presentations in data science I've ever heard. And
too kind. Thanks, man.
Again, you have not disappointed. So I know a question we're getting a lot of is, how do you get involved in data science for social good, especially if you're outside some of the hub areas that you listed?
It's a great question. So I think the biggest challenge, we will admit up front, there are more people who want to get involved than opportunities to get involved. However, there's increasingly more. So I would say definitely come to datakind.org/get involved. Some of you out there may have done this before and said, yeah, I already signed up. We're working our way through our backlog, but we do accept volunteers from all over the world. The regional hubs are helpful and good communities, but we work everywhere. So please sign up with us if that's interesting to you. Increasingly, just worth noting, there are other places to get involved too. So in the US, Data for Democracy is a community group that builds data science solutions for democratic aims in the US. Kaggle, the online data science competition, will often have data for good projects there. And then there are kind of one-offs, not one-offs, but things that come up occasionally. Like there was a project about a month ago between IBM and the Red Cross called the Call for Code, where they wanted people to build data science solutions and algorithms for humanitarian response. We tend to advertise those through our Twitter channel and through our Twitter account and our newsletter. So even if you just get involved with us and sign up, even if we can't take it on a project right away, there'll be lots of opportunities coming through us there as well.
Great. Another question we have, what are some of the challenges, particularly maybe communication challenges between data scientists and the people who are trying to do social good and kind of living and breathing this sector?
I'm so glad you said that. There are, anytime you bring two folks together from different fields, there's always some communication impedance mismatch. You've got to kind of bring people to the same language. And a lot of ways, at DataKind, we think of ourselves as just trying to be that glue. So I'd say there's two, if not three things to be aware of. Yeah, I'll say three things to be aware of. The first is at DataKind, we play jargon cop. That means if we try to listen for jargon on either side and quickly ask, hey, what does that mean? Even if we already know, because often people are too afraid to speak up. So if a data scientist says API in front of a nonprofit, that might not be obvious what that is. Oh, application programming interface, here's what that is. The Sustainable Development Goals, which are the UN's goals for humanity, are often called the SDGs in shorthand. So if a nonprofit partner says, oh, we're looking at this SDG, oh, wait, what's that? Do we all know what a Sustainable Development Goal is? So one is like, try to play jargon cop. And this is just good communication practice. Is like, always kind of be listening with a filter to yourself. And am I using words that are so common to me, I don't even realize that they're not common to everyone else? So that's one thing. The other thing, and I think we can do a great job as a community in helping with this, is to help get more precise about the definition of data. In some ways, I think if we had been called like quantum computing kind, our job would be easier, because no nonprofit will come to us and say, I know what I need with quantum computing. Most would be like, what is this? I don't even know how to start. The challenge is, in the nonprofit world, there's a rich history of using data, particularly for monitoring, for basically just collecting information, reporting. And so the challenge there is when nonprofits come to us and they hear, oh, DataKind, yeah, I need help with my spreadsheets, or I need my Salesforce database updated. But what we're talking about, of course, is the application of data to statistical modeling and algorithms. So there's a huge mind shift between people coming and thinking DataKind can help them with their basic infrastructure or metrics creation, versus I want an algorithm to make myself more efficient. So I think as data, and I see data used sloppily in a lot of spaces. So I think we as data scientists can help get more crisp about what are we talking about in each moment. And then very lastly, I would just say, it always comes back to the last communication piece, is how do you use this when I'm gone? So what does this thing really do? What is the ROI for you, so to speak? A lot of folks in our team sometimes explain the data work they've done to partners, and they're talking about it in a technological sense. Well, we used Redshift for this, and when we did this study, the p-value showed this. That stuff is just like over people's heads. What they really care about is, how do I do my job better tomorrow? And so we will often try to make great effort to train folks in saying at the end of a DataKind project, here's what, Amnesty International, here's how this tool will help you in the future. Here's what could go wrong with it. Here's what you should look out for, in just kind of plain English. P.S. This is, if you haven't run into this in your career, a skill you're going to need with any non-technical decision maker above you. Like, this is the marketing team, your boss. Like, you kind of got to do the same thing. So it's not that different in the social sector.
Yeah, very true. And then kind of in a similar vein, how do you think about explaining or justifying your project or mission to folks outside of the nonprofit, right? Maybe rural activists, maybe the people in the community that you're impacting, but who aren't necessarily directly in the nonprofit that you're working for?
Oh, what a great question. Because I think inherent in that question is a question about who is a stakeholder in this. And when you're working on social good, I mean, I mentioned those 6 components of a good project. All of those folks in some way touch this. The people who provide the data, the nonprofit you're working with, and to your point, the people the nonprofit seeks to serve, who's really at the end of the day your real end user. So I'd say we need to actually get better at this, but we tend to do 2 things to try to get around this. And no matter how good or bad we are at it, I hope everyone else here can do this because it's great. The first is trying to bring those beneficiaries into the design phase in the beginning. It's a big upfront cost, but it pays huge dividends. One of our teams in DC actually ran an event with on foster care. And they did it with a foundation who specializes in foster care, Annie Casey Foundation. They brought in the Annie Casey Foundation's nonprofit grantees, so the people who work in foster care. They brought in data scientists, of course, and data holders. But then the subject matter experts they brought in were foster kids. They brought in people who had gone through the foster care program who wanted to help figure out what could we design. They were part of the process, and some of them had even gone on to become software engineers, data scientists. So they actually could not only come advise on the process, they could actually also look at the data and go, oh, no, like there's a reason this is wrong, like because I know this about the process, and I can also analyze it to tell you this is not right. So so I would say that's huge if you can do that. And then on the back end, this is where I really think we could do more is we always try to, with every product that goes out, we open source everything we can, not the data, but the results. And then we just give like explainers on, hey, this is what this does, this is what you should care about, and really open it up to the community to say like, kick against it, raise questions, because the only way that these things are going to work well is when people can audit them. There's a big gap there because this raises the data literacy question, and like most of the public, I think, can't really like critically engage with an algorithm or data science. So there's a big gap there that's not yet solved, but we're trying our best.
Absolutely. And then, we were talking about this a little earlier. How do you think about sustained impact? So you come in, you do a project, it's great, but there's, obviously, if with any data science project, if you want to make it replicable, if you want to get this report or this analysis every day or every week, there's a lot more engineering that kind of goes into that. And then on the other side of that, the human side, oftentimes you have this great analysis and it says, well, now the business or the nonprofit has to change the way it operates. And that can sometimes lead to resistance of, well, I've always done it this way. Why should I do it this newfangled way? Some 20-something hipster told me it was a good idea.
Totally. That's such a great question. So there's one thing that we do to try to mitigate against this, but then I think there's sort of a bigger kind of partnership play here. So the way I hear this is like, how do you keep the work going? How do you do all the adorning work? So one light move that we make is we try to scope the work to something that the organization can take on themselves. So we did, we did a project with a nonprofit that had a data science team of one and had data infrastructure. They just had all these algorithms they wanted to build that they didn't have time for. So we tested them, built prototypes, and then handed it off to that data scientist who was like, great, I can incorporate this into our workflow. One team actually put it into place during a weekend hackathon. And so we're like, great, you can absorb this. Worked with another group that was 2 people with no tech skills. And so for them, we built a report and basically just wrote an analysis to say, hey, we looked at all this data you cared about. Here's what we found. Here are the trends. That's something they could, act on more actionably. So that's like kind of the cheap answer is scope it to what the organization can absorb. But I call it a cheap answer because it doesn't work in every case. Sometimes big changes are needed. And so there, I think we're trying to get very realistic about the fact that DataKind, as much as I wish this were true, can't be the full stack for everyone because we're a volunteer network. So by definition, we do short-term engagements. You wouldn't really want your data infrastructure being built and maintained by part-time volunteers. That doesn't feel like the right support structure and continuity. But what we've seen is really powerful is that DataKind projects can be these catalysts for folks who maybe don't even know what data infrastructure they need because they don't know what algorithms can be built. But if someone can come in, DataKind volunteers can come build something to show them the art of the possible, then all those questions about, well, here's what you need for infrastructure and funding, et cetera, can be elucidated. And we can often help people partner with the people they need to get that. They can often get those resources. It's actually identifying the need for them and what they should do that's the hardest part. So in a lot of ways, DataKind projects actually really help a lot with that.
Got it. And then how do you mentioned that you talked about this a little bit, but how do you work with those organizations to identify the worthy problems?
Yeah, so we do, basically, I would say we subscribe to the premise that a problem well stated is half solved. And so we will often spend 1 to 3 months just scoping and designing a problem with a partner. And the way it works is at DataKind, our staff will kind of take a first vet of an organization, just say, do we even hear a there? To see, you know, we think there could be data science in what they do, or do they need someone else's help right off the bat? But if they pass that test, then we actually have a special kind of volunteer called a data creative, who is usually your kind of, you know, imagine data science consultant, someone who's really good at hearing a want and mapping it back to an actual data science need, being creative, is able to get their hands on the data. And they'll come with us during this design phase to work with the partner to basically go through a pretty standard process we do. And this probably looks like a lot of people's data science discovery process. One, we just map out the company. What are you trying to do? What's your social change mission? How do you do it? How does it all work together? Because then we can hone in on the bottlenecks and go, okay, this one sounds like, you know, it's not a data science problem. It sounds like a political problem. These two people don't like each other, so they can't move here. But this thing about, you know, triaging too many people coming to the homeless shelter, well, that could be a data science problem. So we'll hone in on that. And then we'll actually go through a scoping phase with them where we're collecting data from them. Again, here, the word data is confusing. So people usually think you mean the surveys they collected, but we're really saying any digital data we can find, try to find data outside. And then with our data creatives, build out this scope to say, here are the things that are possible. And once we're done with that process, I'd say the rest is like more straightforward. Now you can just do the project, but that first phase, really getting people to like, what are your challenges and where's that data? That's the thorniest part. But in my mind, it's the most fun. So that's how we do it.
And so you primarily use staff to do that identification, or do you use the volunteers for that?
Yeah, it's an interesting combo. So we always want to take a first pass ourselves because we don't want to. There's nothing more demoralizing usually to volunteers than, you know, taking your limited time to just beat against a dead end or you know, a partner that's not going to be responsive. So we'll do a kind of first fit with staff. But then we do employ volunteers to help do the scoping process. Some of them do love that consultative process, you know. I don't know if I can, I was going to say, I don't want to name names to like out people. But then again, is it a secret that they volunteered for this? I don't think so. But if anyone knows like Claudia Perlich, she's fantastic. She's in this space. She's helped us so many times and she's so good at this. I always wish I could just like work with her forever. But she's so good at listening to someone who doesn't know how to speak data and just hear their needs and guide them to what they need, assess whether it's possible, and then come back to DataKind and say, great, there is or isn't a project here. Here's what it would or wouldn't take. And that's it. So we use a lot of kind of like well-trained volunteers for that. Otherwise, we'd never be able to hit the amount of projects that we want to do. We'd get, yeah, that old saying about consultancies not scaling is true. So the more we can do with volunteers who do scale a little bit better than staff, the more we'll actually get done.
Got it. And then, so do you find that it's hard to collect data, or that within these organizations, and I guess in this kind of sense, when we're talking about data here, we mean like X, Y feature label kind of like data in the machine learning sense. Do you find that that's difficult to collect in an organization because the systems aren't there? I don't know.
Yeah, great question. I mean, yeah, let's not sugarcoat it. Most organizations are chaos zones for data, and no fault to them. Not to disparage it.
Well, for-profits are chaos when it comes to data.
It's fair. It's true. Yeah, all across the board, people could use a little more data hygiene. I think the thing that we see is like, I also want to set expectations. Not every nonprofit that walks in the door is going to be ready for a data science or machine learning project. We're kind of looking for those folks that are on that edge of, you know, have some data or some data set could help them, that we could then push them over the edge in a good way with some analytics or machine learning. So generally, I would say across the space, the problems you see, especially as you go to more less developed areas, as you know, lack of the biggest bottleneck is like if you're really in an area where there isn't even digital information, they're putting stuff on paper. Not much to do there until something's digitized. The next step up is we are digitizing stuff. We're using computers, but there's no central database. It's like each person kind of keeps their own information. There's no record keeping, or no like basic data management system. So there, it's a lot of hunt and peck, and we'll like kind of, we can often do stuff because there, sometimes people are just, will come to us and say, we've done 5,000 text surveys. We've had people answer surveys. That's not exactly like big data in the sense we think of in the corporate sector. It's not in a data management system, but that's still more survey responses than a person on a 2-person team, in a health clinic wants to like go through and code. So there's actually, practically that, where I think some analytics or just, basics, understanding what's in those responses can be very helpful. But then like, I think the sweet spot is organizations where you can tell they either have a digital platform. So I mentioned Medic Mobile. I mean, they're using cell phones for the service they deliver. There's digital information, there's a system they're using. So there's tons of passive data there. Those are fantastic groups. The other one that we run into a lot are groups where folks who are working on deforestation or coastline erosion, anything you can see from overhead, obviously that you've got a built-in opportunity there for satellite imagery. And now increasingly we're working a lot of teams who have drone data. One of the things that's really interesting is like, there are so many different competing people just flying drones around. There's almost like a need to pull it all together and just say like, how many people have gone over this area? What spots haven't we covered? There's some coordination there. A team called We Robotics actually does some of that. So if you're curious, they do drone imagery for social good. But anyway, I'm getting carried away. To go back to your question, the data landscape it's messy, it's rough. It kind of follows those stages of like everything's on paper, things are digital but not organized, to we have a data infrastructure, and it's a very fat pyramid. Most people are down in the bottom 2 layers, and so be prepared for that.
Got it. Yeah. So what's coming next? What are the exciting things?
Oh, thank you for asking. So if you think about DataKind today, right, hopefully from this talk, you've gotten the sense that we get volunteers around the world, they work on projects. It's great. They make organizations more efficient. They show them what's possible. But our goal as DataKind is not to just do 1 million projects. We've gotten pretty good at it over the last few years, but the reason we got in this was to the point in the beginning of the talk, like I want to see a world where our biggest human challenges are being addressed with data science and machine learning. If we've got, if climate change is bringing rising water, I want to know how we're going to adapt to that. If we could transport food more effectively with algorithmic optimization, I want that to happen. Knowing that, of course, data and machine learning are not the ultimate solution. Sometimes they're not even a part of the solution, but to the extent this can be used, it's a huge opportunity. So what we're thinking about is, how do we go beyond just more projects to actually starting to make some shift towards a world where people can actually do this themselves. And so what we've noticed is across our network, when people start to do enough DataKind projects in an area, you start to see this coalescence. So you start to look and go, wait a second, 5 of these projects all built kind of the same microfinance credit risk algorithm. So there's, in a way, you're kind of doing like product market fit testing. You're going, oh, wait a second, there's a thing here lots of organizations need. We've tried a bunch of prototypes of it. There might be something here to build out. In other cases, we've done a project with partners. Nonprofits, if you're not familiar, often get their money from foundations. In a way, the foundations are kind of their customers. And they have trouble getting data science funding because a lot of funders go, well, I want to like save the whales. I don't know what this data science thing is you want funded. But once we build a project, they go back to the funders. And the funders go, oh, you can do satellite imagery, mine detection. Here's money to keep doing that. And so we see money start to pour in. We also see our volunteers start to work at these organizations. So what we're seeing is, what I'm trying to get at is, when we do DataKind projects in an area, you start to see this flow of resources into that area for more data science, whether it's because a product might become available or professionalized, because funding might come in, because nonprofits might come in, or data scientists might flow in. So there's a long way around of saying, the thing we're going to do at DataKind is we're going to start focusing in these issue areas. So across our global network, we're putting out the calls to say, hey, we want to work on clean water delivery. It's one of the things the United Nations cares about. Let's have a global force working on this in their areas. Let's learn across it. It's a big learning organization. And actually go beyond just saying, hey, we did a bunch of different pilots, to the next part of the story, which is, and therefore, someone should fund this. This thing should get built. Hey, Google, build this water tracking tool, whatever it is. And so in that way, we're thinking of DataKind becoming, we'll still do volunteer projects, of course, that's kind of the main mechanism, but we're thinking of ourselves almost more less as, hey, we do volunteer data science, and more like we're trying to build the data science for social good marketplace, so that in the future, organizations would naturally be able to say, hey, here's the tool we need to build. They might be able to go get data scientists from a data science for social good consultancy. Basically, again, if you want to get out of the volunteer model, we want to get to a place where this whole thing is running smoothly and the funders and Googles and nonprofits of the world are working together without DataKind right now having to kind of pull everything together. So that's what we're doing right now. We're going into issue areas. If you like that, come aboard. We're looking forward to grow a lot and do a lot of cool stuff. So it should be fun.
Well, yeah, no, that sounds really exciting. Well, I'll definitely be keeping an eye on what DataKind is doing in the next few months and years. So I want to thank Jake for coming and speaking. I thank the audience for joining us. I hope you really enjoyed this latest installation of Data Science in 30 Minutes. And if you're interested in learning more about the Data Incubator, our free fellowship for PhDs and master's students, online corporate training, hiring data scientists, you can go online at www.thedataincubator.com, sign up and apply for our program there. And if you're interested in participating in DataKind, either as a nonprofit or as a potential data scientist, data science volunteer, I guess you can go to datakind.org and register there. Does that sound right?
That's absolutely right. Come on datakind.org, follow us on Twitter, find us on the meetups in these various cities, and let's come be a part of it, even if it's just part of the conversation.
Wonderful. Well, cheers. Thanks so much for taking the time, Jake.
Michael, total pleasure. Thank you. Keep doing great stuff with the Data Incubator, and thanks everyone for listening.